Thank you for coming out tonight to the Courageous Conversation Safety event. My name is Sahib Muthuswamy.
I'm Yuri Kamalchiko.
For the past few weeks, we have been working to plan this event in cooperation with Betsy Emberly and Sean Adamek, who have ensured we have a smooth conversation here tonight. We have odd budget. Thank you for being here.
We love you, Saha.
We appreciate you all coming and talking about this event after the recent shooting in Parkland and coming to discuss an important matter that will affect all of our lives overall and bring up the question, can it happen here, and to at least somewhat quell our fears.
Students can make a change, but with the help of passionate adults and a willing community, change can be accelerated. Tonight is a representation of what we can change and set an example for others. Thank you. We're going to pass the mic to Sean Adamek, who will be our host for tonight. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. So first, thanks for coming. This event is a conversation. It's a community conversation. This is not a town hall. The tables are set up like this for a reason, and I'll explain a little bit about that in a second. First, let me talk about, Sahil and Yura just shared what this event is. I'm going to share a little bit about what this event is not. This is not a debate, right? This event grew out of a frustration, actually, about the national dialogue around school safety. And so we're going to do our best to keep to the subject of school safety here in Ashland and what that means for ourselves, what that means for our families, what that means for our communities and our schools, and of course our students. There are some that believe that you can't have a conversation about student safety without talking about gun control, but we're going to try. So I'm going to ask for your help in doing that. We're going to have a panel for a little while. I'm going to prompt some questions. I'm going to introduce these folks in a second. I'm going to prompt some questions, and we're going to talk about the issue at hand for a little bit. And then, as we go, think about some questions you might have, because you might have a chance to ask them. Then, we're going to turn to each other and talk as neighbors, and we have some prompts for you as far as that goes as well. Every table has a host, actually a pair of hosts, to help keep the conversation going. The host's job is to keep the conversation moving, to make sure that everybody has a chance to be heard, and to make sure that the conversation stays on the topic at hand. So, can I get a thumbs up from everybody who's in agreement? Great. All right, let's dive in. So, down the line, let me introduce, I'll start down the end. This is Brian Garrigan. Brian is the head of guidance here at Ashland High School. Next to Brian is Betsy Emberly. Betsy is a Ashland parent, most importantly, and a community activist, and as Sahil mentioned, one of the organizers of this series of conversations. Next to Betsy is Jim Adams, Superintendent of Ashland Public Schools, a post that he's held since 2014. Next to Jim is Sergeant Ed Berman of the Ashland Police Department, and is also a member of the of the safety subcommittee as part of the school committee, the Ashland School Committee. Next is Captain Lynn Morahan of the Ashland Fire Department, also a member of that safety subcommittee. And finally, we have Jennifer Wolfing, who is Director of Human Services and Community Programs for the town of Ashland. Jennifer is also a clinical social worker. So let's welcome our panel, please. So Betsy, I'm going to start with you. You're not the only parent here on the panel, but that's the sort of perspective that you're offering here. We gathered folks here tonight, the students did, under a bit of a provocative prompt. Can it happen here? As a parent, what are your thoughts on that?
I have done some reading and discussing outside of this event, and I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility, but I think it's very highly unlikely. my child is safe in school, he feels safe, or he expresses to me that he feels safe, and I trust the adults at his school and in district.
Jim, as a leader of district, you've got a unique perspective on student safety. Tell us a bit about that perspective. And I don't want folks in the room to take this the wrong way, but what do you know that they don't?
I'm not sure. No, I think, I also want to, Sean, step back a little bit. I'm a parent as well. So while my students do not go to this district, I certainly think about safety in schools quite often. I have a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old, and how we approach safety in my community as well helps me, frame what we're doing here nationally. I think that's really critically important to think about, is that what we're trying to do is really make this a safe environment for all of our students. And going back to Sean's first question about can it happen here, and that was the provocative question, is I don't ever want to stand up and say it can't happen, right? We try to make sure we can take steps necessary to ensure our students are safe. And that goes back to not only making sure doors are locked, our SROs are in our schools, student resource officers for those who are not sure what SRO is, but making sure that we're creating an environment where kids feel safe and comfortable and can connect to adults. That being said, some things you may not know that I know, is the continuous meetings that we have with our safety officers, our first responders, to ensure that our kids are safe, that we're continually looking at our protocols and making sure that those protocols really reflect our community and keeping our kids safe. We have 5 buildings in the Ashland Public Schools. Quite often we focus on just one school, right? We'll focus on the high school. Well, we have 5 buildings that we really need to focus on the safety protocols in each building. Very different than maybe the high school, which is new. Thinking about going to Mendez, built in 1954, in 1956 renovated. What are the security protocols we have to, employ there are very different than the ones we have to employ here at Ashland High School. So those are things that we're constantly working at and trying to do the best we can with the resources we have. And we're very fortunate. We do have a very close working relationship with our first responders, which I think is really important.
So, and as one of those first responders, talk a little bit about, and Lynn, talk a little bit about, I'm a parent, Ashland parent. I've got 2 kids in the system, one about to be. A couple of months ago, I emailed Jim and said, we've heard there are procedures. As parents, we'd like to know what they are. And I have to believe there's a reason you're not sharing, and learned that there is. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, so with our emergency committee, we do meet regularly, and we're always looking at the plans. But there's certain things that is really for staff only to know about. It's because if something happens, it's information that we need to know where kids are going to be, where emergency responders are going to respond to. And then there's the other things that everyone can know about.
I agree with Ed. The best thing that we can do as first responders is we can't prepare for every situation, but we can prepare for some, and that's what we do. We do the fire drills 4 times a year. We respond to all the schools for medical emergencies, so that the kids get to see the animals and the engines. So the best thing that we can do is just by preparing the kids, by the different jobs that we do.
Let's talk about some of that preparation. Jennifer, you're a social worker. What does that mean for students, their sort of mindset, to have that a part of their life as a student, those sort of preparations?
Well, I think we have to create a culture where kids are comfortable coming to us and speaking out if they're concerned, and if they are frightened of somebody or they have heard a threat. All of us in here need to be available to take that seriously. In terms of, can it happen here? I agree very much with Jim. we're not impervious to the culture around us, in the States. But Massachusetts is among the safest states with the gun laws that we have, and Ashland is identified as one of the safest communities. And I think we should be proud of that and continue to foster that safety.
Brian, we as a nation are seeing students mobilize and have amplify their own voices. We're here tonight as a result of students organizing around an issue that they care about. As a member of the staff here in the school, you surprised by that?
I'm not at all surprised. The student body here are intelligent, socially conscious, and these folks here tonight that were inspired to have this community conversation are examples of that. So no, I'm not surprised at all.
Anybody else at work? Anybody else that works with students?
So I may have been removed for the last 4 years from being actually in the hallways on a daily basis with students and making connections. But I think what's important from my lens is that when I do walk the hallways and I do have conversations with kids, that I go back to the walkout scenario where there's this thoughtfulness that our students in Ashland have, that I've been in numerous districts, and it really is heartening and heartwarming to see the thoughtfulness that our students put into an event and to be engaged within a community and want to see change. And so I'm not shocked at all. In the 9 years I've been in this community, I've seen that on a regular occurrence. That being said, I think it's really an interesting time to be a student. I've said this numerous times, it's hard. It's hard being you right now as students. And I think as adults, the only way we can really help make it less hard is to start to engage with you more and to get to know you better. And I think we do that pretty well here. I think Kelly's done a phenomenal job as principal of getting staff as well as students to engage in one another in dialogue, which I think is critically important to create that safe environment that we're hoping that we create.
Betsy, as a parent, there's a lot of parents here tonight. There's a lot of tough stuff on TV and in the news. Expose them to it or shield them from it?
My child is a high school student, so I don't have as much control as I used to over what he sees, but I'm not sure I would want to edit what he sees anyway. I think in our family we try and discuss it. When there are difficult things in the media, we have conversations at home, and I pay attention to the conversations in the community and try and extract some bits of what kinds of conversations he's having at school without being too annoying. I think I said something, but that's what I strive for.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. I think that it's an opportunity for a conversation to have with our kids and the students. We have to encourage them to feel their feelings, because suppressing them is not going to do anybody any favors. And if they're good indicators on learning how to respond to those feelings, like you folks all did, or students and kids all did, in response to the Parkland shooting, you wanted to have a conversation, and we should encourage that. I think that, feel your feelings and learn how to express them, and let them guide you. You don't need to suppress them. It's not going to do anybody good.
Let's talk about prevention. In the wake of a national incident of any kind, that is immediately where the conversation turns, for better or for worse. A lot of finger pointing, a lot of blaming happening. Let's start at the end, Brian. As a faculty member in the school,
Yep.
how do you think about prevention?
It's a complicated question. Some of the symptoms, one component of prevention is to identify people that are struggling. I don't mean as if to say they might be capable of violence, but to identify those who might just simply be struggling so that they can be helped. So symptoms might be folks who are feeling isolated or are visibly isolated. Folks who show a fascination with certain things like cults or weaponry or war or other things that might be considered violent. And this doesn't mean that this person has a likelihood of being violent or is going to be violent. It's an indication that they're hurting and they need help. Alienation, that's a tough one. Adolescence is feelings of alienation. So just because you're feeling alienated means you're a teenager. It doesn't mean you are maybe at risk of hurting somebody. But all of these kinds of symptoms together might mean that somebody needs some intervention or some help. It's a tough question. Any one of these kinds of symptoms by itself doesn't necessarily mean anything, but a few of them together or several of them together might really mean that we want to talk to that individual, we want to talk to their folks, and we want to get a better sense of what we might do to help them. Those are my thoughts on prevention on an individual student level.
Yeah, I think that we need to take threats very seriously. I think we need to take domestic violence very seriously and animal cruelty very seriously. You know, those can be precursors to more extreme violence behaviors. And exactly, you know, what you said. It doesn't mean just because you've engaged in those things that means you're going to turn out to be a shooter. But there are things that we need to take. Those are things that we need to take very seriously. Chronic and impulsive intimidation behaviors and history of aggression. All that kind of stuff.
I want to go back to, Sean, the conversation. You hear me say this a lot about climate culture and how critically I think important that is within a community, in the school community especially. I think when we empower our adults and our students to build and forge relationships, that's when we have the best success in terms of prevention. That now we have young adults who are willing to speak up. You know, go back to the John Trout line last week in his conversation with regard to acting, right? So acknowledge that something is occurring, and then, you know, go ahead and make sure you tell somebody throughout this process. Be comfortable. I know quite often as teenagers, and I have one, he doesn't want to speak up if he sees something because he's afraid of what it might look like telling on a friend, as opposed to really understanding that the conversation is, how are we helping your friend? And I think that's critically important for us to be successful in prevention, is getting to a situation where our adults and our young adults in our buildings feel comfortable with that conversation.
I can add on something there too. So, you know, for the last year and a half, 2 years, we've had the anonymous tip line where, you know, we haven't gotten any tips on anything. But again, you know, sometimes you wonder if kids are going to think someone's going to recognize their voice or what have you. So the emergency committee, we recently met with the people from Sandy Hook Promise, and in the very near future, we're going to be rolling out a mobile app, anonymous mobile app to all students, where they can report something that they would just like somebody to know about. Anything that comes through the app gets monitored 24 hours a day by staff at Sandy Hook Promise, and anything that they feel needs to come back to someone right away, whether it's law enforcement or one of these school administrators, they will be getting those phone calls so that we can start working on that tip right away. see if we can help.
All right, so that was prevention. Let's talk a little bit about perhaps more uncomfortably response. There is an incident at one of our buildings. Law enforcement, police and fire are the first to get a report. I'm imagining there are probably conflicting reports of exactly the nature of the incident. How do you all work together, or perhaps even you three, the district and law enforcement, to figure it out?
I think, one of the things that we first worked out as the emergency committee was our communication with one another. So now all school administrators have access to the police and fire frequencies. They can jump onto our radio frequency right away. We communicate with the fire on a daily basis. And then we even thought about adding in how do we communicate with all of our school buses. So every officer, every firefighter, every school administrator has access to the school bus frequency, so we can talk to our drivers right away to move buses wherever we need them to be. But again, it's that first officer, or if the fire department's arriving on scene, to try to get us the information on what's actually happening and what we need to do next.
Ed, I'm sorry. Would you give a couple of the examples that we've had in the past 2 years, really, one at the middle school and one in the high school, and how we employed some of our strategies, as well as working with the bus company and area police officers from surrounding communities as well. I think that's important to know that it's not just about the Ashland first responders, that quite often we're working with first responders from other districts as well.
So one of the things that we did when we were creating, for example, our transportation plan was, we have 18 full-size school buses. So what we did was we came up with an agreement with the Metro West Regional Transit Authority. So in the event we have an emergency where we need to evacuate one of our buildings, they immediately send us 2 of their vehicles, which are handicap accessible, and each one of those buses can handle 2 wheelchairs on top of that. So just an example, at the middle school, we had the electrical fire at the middle school where we needed to move all the kids from the middle school here to the high school. And it was in the middle of the day. We had 14 buses at the middle school in 9 minutes and a full evacuation in 16 minutes. And that included the buses from the Transit Authority that transported our, at the time, Project Accept kids.
A big part of that is, again, our preparation and everybody practicing the fire drills. And then as soon as we get the information, it allows us to make the decision on the resources that we're going to need. And just like Ed said, a lot of times you're going to see much more resources than just national, especially with experience. So.
One more thing that the emergency committee also created was a reunification plan. In the event, for example, we had to move all the Warren school kids over here to the high school and then had to do a dismissal with parents coming into the building, we actually have a plan in place for each building where we're going to do the reunification with their parents from.
It's interesting, as a parent, I'm learning a lot just right now. I'm interested as law enforcement. You clearly are preparing for the worst. That's your job. What keeps you up at night?
The 3 a.m. phone call from Jim Adams to see if we should have school.
I keep him up.
My brain goes a million miles an hour. So I'm always thinking of everything and the what ifs. And again, you can prepare, but you'll never prepare for everything. It's impossible. It's one of those things you say you thought you've seen it, you'll never see it again, and you do. You see something else.
What we try to resort back to is our training. So we try to prepare for as much as we can, but when an incident actually occurs, we go back to the very basics of our training, and that's, for us, it's always scene safety. So if it's just a basic medical emergency, we always start with scene safety. Whether it's a small size scale incident or it's a large one, we've got to make sure that the first responders are safe, and then all the students and faculty are safe too.
And to Lynn's point, this really is about us communicating with one another and trusting the fact that, listen, I'm not in law enforcement, I'm not in fire prevention, or I'm not a first responder. So developing that relationship from our principals through our first responders is really important, because they're the ones, although we may be responsible for the building and what's going on within the building, we are listening continuously to those who deal with emergency situations on a daily basis. It's not what we hope. It keeps me up at night because I don't know how we're going to respond should something occurs, but what makes me feel real comfortable is that not only have we had drills, not only do we communicate on a regular basis, but we have personal relationships in each building, from the building leadership level to and with our first responders. That's what allows me to sleep better, is knowing that we're going to be able to get through any situation we have because we've developed that relationship.
And one other thing, on the law enforcement side, Officer Murray's the school resource officer, and most, our people in our police department are really good, if something happens at night or on weekends when he's not working, to notify him so that he's kind of can prepare for it before he even comes back to school on Monday morning.
I'm interested now in the aftermath, which is where we're sort of living, aftermath of a national incident, or God forbid a local one. And Jennifer, can we as a community overreact?
I'm not prepared to say that everybody's overreacting. I think that I'm continuously impressed with the kids from the Parkland schools and how they've used their privilege and how they've put their feelings of anger and frustration and heartbreak and bereavement into action. And I don't think that there's any overreaction to 17, or 15 children, 3 adults, or anybody losing their life. I think that it's also important to incorporate self-care with the reaction, and it's not an overreaction, but you can't live and breathe all of this every day. You've got to take some step backs, but I wouldn't say it's an overreaction.
Brian, how is this topic and even the incidents that we hear about sitting with the faculty?
That's a great question. I was looking at the cheat sheet, and desensitization was one of the words. I'd say so. I'm desensitized. I think you almost have to be to be a pro for 8 hours, 9 hours, or 12 hours a day. You've got to put it on the shelf to a certain degree in order to do your job. So I would say that there's some of that with my colleagues, and it's necessary in order to do your job.
Questions from you all? I've got the mic. I'd like you to have the mic. Raise your hand, I'll come to you.
So I just want to give you a round of applause for doing that kind of response, for getting that many children out of the school system in 9 minutes. I don't know if anybody realizes what kind of feat of just an amazing act that was to do that in that kind of emergency. So,
Sorry, I'm going to walk in front of the camera.
Hi, I'm Karen Wildstein, and I'm a community member. But I was very intrigued by what you said about Sandy Hook's program. Do you know if that was in place in Parkland?
I don't know. So we've actually given Sandy Hook promise, but go ahead, that we want to do this, and they're actually meeting with us this Thursday to get us up and running. I mean, that would be a question we'd have to ask them.
Yeah, I guess the second question that I have, sort of in the same realm, does do the Ashland schools have some kind of video monitoring in place? It looked like Parkland did. Do we?
We do. I mean, we have, again, we certainly could invest in more infrastructure with our video monitoring inside and on the exterior, but we do have video monitoring. When the school was built, especially the high school was built, we included that within the project and the scope. But now the conversation we have been having at the safety level is it adequate and can it be upgraded? And the answer is it may be adequate, but it needs to be upgraded as well. And you know, in terms of, it's also, to me, the conversation I had with the committee was we've got to do a better job as parents and as you know, school students in schools, as well as our teaching staff, on a couple fronts. One, when you get buzzed into the school, so you're outside, the door's locked, and you get buzzed in, don't hold the door open for the next person to come in. Let it shut, and then allow that next person to be buzzed in as well. It's a change in procedure, because quite often you're running and you've got your hands full, and someone's being buzzed into the office, and you just want to get in, so you don't have to buzz and wait. So it becomes, routine just to sneak in with someone. Same with here at the high school when I was the principal, and I'm sure it still exists today. You're running late, school has begun, and you don't want to miss, don't want to be marked tardy for that first period class, and you text your friend to say, hey, come open the door by the student parking lot, and what happens is that door doesn't always shut. So now you've created an opportunity, a riskier opportunity to get someone in. I think those are things we need to be thinking about and be a little more hypervigilant as individuals as well. Making sure that those doors are shut, making sure that when you're going to another building, you're introducing yourself, who you are, your purpose, you're stating your purpose. So that's training though from our standpoint that we have to be better at for sure. But that's where I stand on the things, Carol.
And I'll add something to that too. So about two and a half years ago, the town, we partnered with the schools and we installed a town-wide door access system. So for example, teachers at the high school have access to get into the high school doors. But one of the things that we did was every police officer and all the lieutenants on the fire department, we have 24-hour access into all the schools with our key access cards. So think about it, we show up for an incident, the doors are locked, but now every officer can get in at any time, 24 hours a day.
Hi, I'm Carly Davis, 7th grade boy, a former high school graduate too, and my question is there a police presence at every school during school hours? And what are the resource officers and what do they do? Are they visible, etc.?
Ed and I will take turns with this. I want to back up, is there presence in the buildings on a regular basis? Okay, and the answer to me as superintendent when I'm at the buildings all the time, yes, there's a regular presence. That doesn't mean we have a dedicated student resource officer for each building. We do not, the funding is not adequate in order to do that, and Chief is here and he would tell you we have 2 individuals trained currently, is that correct, Chief? Shaking your head? And we have one that's stationed here at the high school, Officer Mary, and then we have another one that was trained to be at the middle school. But that being said, and she's out on maternity leave, but that being said, we do have a presence in each school every single day. Ed and Dave make their rounds to the schools. But in terms of that continuous all day presence, no. Mainly here at the high school, yes, and in the future at the middle school.
And if any of the school administrators in any of the buildings have any concerns, they call either myself or Officer Murray and we head right over there.
Other questions?
Hi, my name is Subish. I'm a sophomore.
have actually, I was listening to NPR on my way to work today, and they were talking about a system putting in place at some school they're testing now. And I think it all started after whatever has happened, that incident that you that occurred. So the system is basically like the moment you got a shot, the entire system kind of activates and the building is locked down or something like that. So I don't know if you guys have heard about something like this or if you're planning on doing something security like that where it can be automated. If something happens, everything locks down and then the system takes over or something like that.
I'm not sure that's been brought up in the
Yeah.
safety committee.
Yeah, it hasn't.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And maybe it's something that we can certainly move forward and have conversations at the safety committee level. You said it was on NPR?
Yeah, it was an NPR. I think they're testing the system out, and
Okay.
schools are kind of going as early adopters to the system.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, David Carey. My girls still have a ways to go considering the oldest is 8. So I was just curious, I'm trying to remember whether it's New Jersey or Maryland, but there was a follow-up incident in which we managed to avoid any bystander fatalities, and I'm curious whether, in addition to looking at what went wrong in the Parkland situation, look at what went right in that case.
So it was Maryland, and the answer is yes. That's, again, it goes back to we continually evaluate what our systems are. And when Ed was speaking about evacuation of the middle school to the high school, or the high school kids to the middle school, we've had that occur. We debrief as a group to talk about what went right, what went wrong, what can we get better at. So the answer is yes. We're continually evaluating the good and the things that we can improve upon, absolutely.
Hi, I'm Steve Jones. I have a sophomore, senior, and a lot of them. So I guess my question is more around mental health, and you talked about some prevention and identifying some of the students that might be struggling, or maybe have been identified, feel alienated or isolated somehow. I'm just wondering, what are the parameters, or what are the barriers you have for reaching out to people, some of the students, identifying them if they don't, really do anything violating? Is there a restriction, or is there, is it difficult to reach out to students and their families at home, try to come together and identify someone that's struggling, if they're not really causing a problem?
So our school staff are really good at identifying kids with mental illness or have any questions about that. The piece that we're actually working on right now is with Jennifer. Jennifer was hired about 6 months ago, a little more. So Jen is a social worker for the town. So right now what we're working on with town council is a memorandum of understanding so that the school department and the police department can share information back and forth with Jennifer. So if we have someone in the community that we think might need some treatment, we can refer Jennifer and kind of keep everybody in the same loop together. So if something happens on the weekends or whatever, we can use Jennifer, we can use school support staff, and just have one big system.
And also, if there's imminent risk, we don't need permission to intervene. If somebody makes an active threat, police can bring somebody against their will to the emergency room for a risk assessment. And so we don't need permission for that. We can respond in an emergency basis.
Other questions?
I'm Robert Jensen, a sophomore here at Ashland High School, and after listening to everyone talk about what they think is school safety and precautions, I'm interested to know what you guys think of what the students think. What do you guys think the students' opinions are? And have you connected with your them on that, and what do you think they might know?
That to me is a fantastic question, and one which I probably can't answer appropriately. I think when we look at our Metro West Adolescent Health Survey results, which is you take every 2 years, when we talk about connectedness to our schools, you feel safe in our schools, are you connected to an adult within our schools? Those are actually some of the questions that we've looked at in the past 9 years since I've been here to figure out how can we become better connected. And continually surveying students, I think is one way we can do that, is to find out, do you feel safe? And if not, what are the barriers to feeling safe? And we've certainly, I think, over time have seen more students feeling comfortable within the school setting and connecting more to adults. But we have a long ways to go in that. We absolutely do. And those are the things that I hope that as we move forward as a district, we're asking you. And you're being asked specifically from the leadership within, not only at my level, but in the schools. Are you comfortable here? Do you feel safe? Are you connected to an adult? And it goes back to that whole relationship piece. You have to be connected. We have to do a better job of connecting with you in developing relationships.
Okay, I have a question for everybody. How many 10th graders are here right now? So, for those of you who don't know, I've been teaching in the wellness program for the last few weeks here at the high school. How many of you have listened to me? So not only have I been teaching a little bit, but I'm kind of hoping that I'm building a connection with you. So if you're not comfortable talking to somebody in the high school that works here, that you feel comfortable talking to me, talking to Officer Miri. And I've told you all in that class, if you have something, you can pull me aside anytime. I've said that a few times. And I'm kind of hoping that we're building connections that way also.
Brian, I'm interested in your response to that question. In terms of from a faculty standpoint, what do you all do to keep your ear to the ground to make sure that you have a sense of the dialogue that's happening among the students?
We have a response to intervention team that meets once every 7 days. And that involves counselors, administrators, nurse, teachers. So that's institutionalized. Other than that, IEP teams are talking routinely, and that's institutionalized. So beyond the institutionalized things that happen in a regimented, sequential kind of way, teachers are talking to each other all the time in the teachers' rooms during lunch, and valuable information presents in all of those informal formats as well. So
I'll follow up by saying, when you look around this room, we have no less than 10 teachers, administrators, educators of the Ashland Public Schools who are here tonight on their own volition. They don't have to be here. They're here to connect, to understand, to learn as well what we can do better. They've got their own feelings about, probably the good things we do and the poor things we do, but they're here. And that, to me, is one indicator of that we're moving in a direction where our staff is really thinking about what's best for everyone and building those relationships again. So thank you for being here. You've been here a long day, and it's been a long day, and you're continually here to try to make this a better place. So I appreciate that.
So I just wanted to expand on something I brought up before. A lot of these shootings but that they spend a lot of time alone at home, checking resources and growing. Maybe they've been habitual offenders and they've been suspended a lot and they're at home alone or maybe not alone, but lack some supervision and some guidance. I just like to understand what the process is with the disciplining and why kids have to go home to be suspended, why they can't stay in school and still suffer consequences, but with maybe an umbrella of people watching them and giving them more constructive things to do, rather than going home and maybe growing and feeling more isolated and maybe punished or dealing with people that obviously, or not obviously, but maybe don't know how to handle them or talk to them. And is there any opportunity for, to make that maybe a severe consequence rather than something that shows up often? And if it is a severe consequence, is there any opportunity for like a resource officer to visit them? Sorry, that's...
No, it's a good question, and I think what's important to understand is there's not one administrator who ever wants to suspend a child, right? We do not want to send children home. Our job is educate kids, and we want them to be in our schools and supported and feeling safe. That being said, we certainly do have policies, or procedures in place that lend itself to disciplinary actions which cause suspensions. And it's a balance of trying to figure out risk of students and staff, and if someone has acted inappropriately that requires a suspension, what does that look like? And again, it's a conversation. Quite often, we may be doing a risk assessment of those kids outside of here. A student who may be suspended for a violent act, a fight, whatever it might be. Those are conversations that we're continually having. And how do we then provide the safety net for all students? I think that's important, that whenever we're faced with disciplinary action, that we're looking at the totality of the 747 students who are in, say, the high school. And at what risk are we putting everyone else at by not suspending a student? So there are many factors that go into making that determination, not just what our procedures look like, but we're doing much more education with our students than we were 10 years ago as to why and what are the consequences for making poor choices. So I think it's becoming more and more common for us to not suspend kids out of school, but to be in school and have an educational component, for sure. No one wants our kids out where they're not being supervised. It does happen, yes. But that's not our goal. I don't think any one of the deans or assistant principals who are here ever want to suspend a child out of school. It's not what we're in it for.
I want to thank our panel and ask you all to join me in thanking them as well.